Hello everyone, welcome to the channel Lang and Lit. This channel is dedicated to English studies. It covers wide range of topics from the whole English syllabus of class 12th and 11th CBSE to vocabulary building, English in competitions and spoken English. You can search this wide range from the playlist of this channel. If this is what you are looking for, subscribe to the channel and do press the like button if you find this video useful. So let's start with today's topic. This chapter, Indigo, is written by Louis Fisher, who's the biographer of Mahatma Gandhi, and this chapter is an interview which he took of Mahatma Gandhi in the Sevagram ashram. The story revolves around the struggle of Gandhi and other prominent leaders in order to safeguard the sharecroppers from the atrocities and the tortures of the landlord. The story starts with the author explaining about his first interaction, that is, the meeting with Mahatma Gandhi. He says that he first met Gandhiji in 1942 at his ashram, which was in Sevagram. It was located in central India. Gandhi said that he would tell him about the struggle against the British, which first took place in 1917. Gandhiji had gone for an annual convention of the Indian National Congress Party in the city of Lucknow. There were around 2,301 delegates and many visitors. During the proceedings of the meeting, Gandhiji recollected there was a peasant who came to meet him. He said, "A peasant came up to me looking like any other peasant in India, poor and emaciated." Rajkumar Shukla told Gandhiji that he was a sharecropper. A sharecropper is a farmer who gives a part of the crop as a rent to the owner of that piece of land that he cultivates. And as a share, he gives some of the crops or a part or a share of the crops to the owner of the land, and the remaining he keeps. That is a sharecropper. He told him that because of the old agreement, many of the peasants, that is the farmers in Champaran, were the sharecroppers. He had come to meet Gandhi on someone's suggestion, as he was determined to find a solution for the sharecroppers who were facing too many hardships due to this agreement. He sought Gandhiji's help. Gandhiji told Shukla he had an appointment at Kanpur, present-day Kanpur, and was also committed to go to the other parts of India. Shukla accompanied him everywhere. Then Gandhi returned to his ashram near Ahmedabad. Then there Rajkumar Shukla followed him to his ashram. For weeks he never left Gandhi's side, and he was begging Gandhiji to fix a date to come to Champaran, his own village. As Gandhiji was impressed with the determination of Rajkumar Shukla, so he said that he would be visiting Kolkata after a few months and that Shukla should meet him there. On that day had been fixed. Shukla was eagerly waiting for Gandhiji on the station. When Gandhiji got free, they both took the train to Patna. Then they went to the house of the lawyer. The lawyer's name was Rajendra Prasad, who later became the President of India, the first President, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. When they reached there, he was not at home, but the servants allowed both of them to stay at the ground because they knew Shukla. They all knew him because Shukla used to assist their master, that is Rajendra Prasad, in helping Indigo sharecroppers. They did not allow Gandhi to draw any water from their well, as they took him to be an untouchable and did not want to pollute the entire water source. So now here we see that still in Champaran, while Gandhiji was there, untouchability was practiced by the people. Then we see Gandhiji decided to go to Muzaffarpur, which was on the route of Champaran, to obtain a more complete information about the condition than Shukla was capable of imparting. So Gandhiji wanted more of the information about these sharecroppers, their present state, what can be the solution, because we know Shukla is a poor sharecropper, he is uneducated, he does not know many things which Gandhi could go and seek from other literate people. He accordingly sent a telegram to Professor J.B. Kriplani of the Arts College in Muzaffarpur, whom he had seen at Tagore's Shantiniketan. The train arrived at midnight on 15th April 1917. Kriplani was waiting at the station with a large body of students. Gandhiji stayed there for 2 days in the home of Professor Malkani. He was a teacher at the government school. While staying at Malkani's home, Gandhiji commented that it was an extraordinary thing in those days for a government professor to help a man like Gandhiji, who is a national leader. Because of the government, they were under the pressure of the government. In small localities, the Indians were afraid to show sympathy for advocates of home rule like Gandhiji. The news of Gandhi's advent or coming and of the nature of his mission spread quickly through Muzaffarpur and Champaran. Sharecroppers from Champaran began arriving on foot and by conveyance to see their champion, that is Gandhiji. Muzaffarpur lawyers called on Gandhiji to brief him. They frequently represented peasants group in the court. They told him about their cases, what their problems were, how they were representing them in the courts, and reported them about the size of the fees they were taking from these sharecroppers. On listening to this, Gandhiji scolded the lawyers for charging such high fees from the poor sharecroppers. He decided that it was useless to go to the courts as the judiciary was not doing anything good for the peasants. He said that as long as the peasants were suppressed and full of fear, it was all useful to visit the courts. He wanted them to set free from fear. So here we see that Gandhiji's priority was not only to win the case for the peasants, but his priority was to make them self-reliant and free from fear. Most of the cultivable land in Champaran district was owned by the Englishmen, who had divided them into different various states or properties. The peasants were the occupants of these lands. Englishmen forced the peasants to cultivate indigo on 15% of their land and to give the crop to them, the whole crop of indigo to them as rent. All this was done through a long-term agreement. Now presently, the landlords learned that Germany had developed synthetic indigo. They now obtained agreements from the sharecroppers to pay them the compensation for being released from the 15% arrangement. Now you see here, now these Englishmen, they do not want the Indian indigo anymore, and they are willing to buy it from Germany because it was cheaper, because it was artificial indigo, and it was cheaper than what they were paying here in India. Now we see that the Englishmen are the ones who were forcing these people to grow indigo, and now they are the ones who do not want the indigo, but they are forcing the peasants, the poor farmers, to pay them back to be released from the agreement. So it was clear-cut exploitation of these farmers. The sharecropping arrangement was very troublesome to the peasants, and many signed willingly. Those who resisted engaged lawyers. The landlords hired thugs. So all these practices were there in the society. Meanwhile, the information about synthetic indigo has reached the illiterate peasants who had signed, and they wanted their money back. When Gandhiji arrived Champaran, he decided to gather some facts. For this, he visited Secretary of the British Landlords Association. The secretary did not answer him because he could not give any information to an outsider. So, for the British secretary, Gandhiji, the national leader, was an outsider. After this, he went to the commissioner of Tirhut division. Champaran district was under Tirhut division. So, the commissioner not only threatened Gandhiji, but also suggested him to leave Tirhut immediately. Though Gandhi was not threatened by the commissioner, he did not leave the place. He then went to Motihari, which was the capital of Champaran. He was joined by several lawyers. When they reached the station, they were welcomed by a large number of people. He then went to a house which was later converted into the headquarters, where all these lawyers and the literate people and Gandhiji used to conduct meetings for their further action. He started his inquiry into the matter. Now Gandhiji decided to visit a village nearby when he came to know about an incident of an ill treatment with a peasant. A peasant was beaten blue and black by the English because he raised his voice. So Gandhiji decided to go. He was on his way on an elephant when the superintendent messenger stopped him and ordered him to return back to the town. Gandhi followed him and the messenger took him back to his home. He was then served a notice which ordered him to quit this movement and return back. Gandhiji received the notice and signed on the receipt, on which he wrote that he would not obey the orders. Now here it is the first time Gandhiji in Champaran has refused to abide by or to obey the orders by the government. Now as a result, Gandhi got summoned to appear in the court next day. Gandhi was not to sleep the whole night. He telegraphed Rajendra Prasad and asked him to come to Bihar and get some powerful people along. He sent some guidelines to the ashram and also telegraphed the whole matter to the viceroy. Now next morning in Motihari, the city of Motihari or the town of Motihari was full of peasants as they wanted to support Gandhi. None of them knew about his work in South Africa. They only knew that there was a Mahatma who wanted to help them and was in trouble due to the officials. So they all gathered in front of the courthouse. Now the incident was their attempt to setting themselves free from the fear of the British. They came together as one unit, as united people of India, united people of their state, united people of their district, to support somebody as their leader. They had to take Gandhi's help to regulate the crowd. Gandhiji politely told the officials that if they would misuse their power, then there were chances that they would have to face a revolt from the Indians. As the situation was getting tougher, the lawyers requested the court to be postponed the trial by some days. The authorities decided to first consult the higher authorities. Gandhiji objected against the delay in the proceedings of the case. He read a statement in front of the court in which he accepted his fault in a very humble manner. Now this is how the wisdom of Gandhiji worked over here in this court. He said that he was not a lawbreaker and did not want to go against the law, but his duty towards humanity has a greater influence on him and it forced him to do so. He refused to leave the town because he wanted to help the sharecroppers as it was his moral duty. The magistrate asked him to arrange for a bail because he was going to give his judgment after 2 hours long break. Gandhiji refused to seek any bail and later on he was released without any bail. Some well-known lawyers like Rajendra Prasad, Brij Kishore Babu and Maulana Mazharul Haq came from Bihar to help and advise Gandhiji. Gandhiji asked that if he was sentenced to jail, then what would be their course of action? What will the lawyers do? One of the senior lawyers replied that they were there to help him out and if he was sentenced to jail, then they would return back. When Gandhi came to know about their decision, he asked them to help the sharecroppers who were facing unfairness. Rajendra Prasad and other lawyers concluded that if Gandhi would go to jail for the people of this area, although he was a stranger, then they should also follow him as they had always claimed to serve these peasants and fought for their legal battles too. So this was an initiative taken by Gandhiji that he was willing to go to jail for these poor peasants, for the welfare of these poor peasants, which made and encouraged, motivated these lawyers also to fight for the sharecroppers and go to jail for their rights and for their benefit. Then they decided that if Gandhi is going to go to jail, so they are going to follow him too. On hearing this, Gandhi assured them that their struggle for Champaran's peasants had been won. So Gandhiji knew that if the leaders, the local leaders, are going to take the initiative and take the chance to fight for and win for these poor peasants, this battle is won. Their struggle for Champaran's peasants had been won. He divided the group into pairs of two and made the sequence in which they had to voluntarily surrender in the court. This was the plan of Gandhiji. After some days, the magistrate sent a letter to Gandhiji in which it was written that as per the orders of the deputy governor, the case against him has been taken back. It was for the first time in modern India that a peaceful protest against the government had been won. Gandhiji and other lawyers carried out with an in-depth investigation into the injustice to the farmers. So they started the investigation, they started researching. Statements about 10,000 peasants were recorded and various documentary proofs were collected. The whole area vibrated with the activity, and the investigators and the protesting landlords were all there into these places. They all were very active. Now, in June, Gandhiji was called to be present before the deputy governor, Sir Edward Gate. Before meeting him, he met his chief supporters and made the plan for the civil disobedience in case he did not return. So they had already planned that if Gandhi is not going to return, they will go for civil disobedience. Gandhiji had 4 long interviews with the deputy commissioner, which led to the formation of a commission. That is, a commission was formed that inquired into the Indigo sharecroppers situation. So finally, the meetings were held, the interviews were taken of Gandhiji, and there was a commission which was made. The commission had landlords, government officials, and Gandhiji, who was the only spokesperson for the peasants. Gandhiji remained in Champaran for 7 months. He also made several short visits later. His visits on the request of the peasants were presumed to the last of the few days, but it took a year. The official inquiry did not favor the planters, hence they agreed to pay back to the peasants. So finally, the official inquiry, which was done by the commission, gave the verdict or the result in favor of the peasants. But they questioned Gandhiji regarding the amount to be repaid. So they asked that what is the compensation that should be paid to the peasants by the landlords. The money lenders had thought that Gandhiji would ask for a full payment of the money which they had taken from the peasants forcefully and by the means of fraud. But Gandhiji asked only 50% of, and his decision was firm. A missionary, Reverend J.Z. Hodge, who was having a close watch on the master's report, the planters offered to pay only 25% as they thought it would be rejected by Gandhiji. He immediately accepted. Gandhiji said that the amount of money was not important, but by giving money, the planters had bowed down. Okay, they have bowed down to the peasants and had given away their honor too. The planters who behaved as if they were above the law are now following the law or abiding by the law. This made the peasants realize their rights and give them courage to fight for them. Now they got this confidence that if they are going to fight for their rights, all the people, whether they are in power, whether they are landlords, whether they are big and rich people, whether they are Britishers, but if these poor farmers will stand for their rights, they can win. Events had proven Gandhiji's position. The British planters had to leave their property within the next few years. These properties were returned back to the peasants. So it was a win-win situation for the peasants of Champaran. Indigo sharecropping soon came to an end. Gandhiji was not satisfied by achieving political or economic solution. Now we need to see here that the character of Gandhiji was such that he did not only had political or economic solutions or measures as his final goal. His final goal was always to emancipate, okay, to make the people self-reliant so that they can fight for themselves, they can provide for themselves. We see here that Gandhiji sought to remove the cultural and social backwardness of Champaran. Gandhiji wanted to do something to remove the backwardness in the village of Champaran. So he requested the teachers such as Mahadev Desai and Narhi Parekh and their wives to teach the village. So these people were like volunteers of Gandhiji. They were the followers and friends of Gandhiji who on his request have come to Champaran to teach the people over there. Both of them were the followers of Gandhiji only. Many other volunteers came from Bombay and Pune to join them. Mrs. Gandhi, that is Mrs. Kasturba Gandhi, and their youngest son Devdas also arrived from the ashram for their help. Primary schools were opened in 6 villages where Kasturba Bai used to teach the ashram rules on cleanliness and community sanitization. So we say here that not only Gandhiji but his family also actively participated in curing the social backwardness of the people of Champaran. Even not only education, the health condition was very poor. So the health conditions of the people in Champaran were very poor. So Gandhiji got a doctor who offered his services free of cost for 6 months. There were only 3 medicines, castor oil, quinine and sulfur. That was an ointment available. The patient with a coated tongue was given castor oil. A malaria patient was served with a dose of quinine, and a patient with a skin disorder was given the ointment and castor oil. So these were the 3 basic medicines which were given to the patients in Champaran. But it was of great help. The women in the area used to wear dirty clothes and torn clothes. When Gandhiji tried to know the reason through his wife, he was told that those were the only saris. Like these women from Champaran were only having one sari that they were wearing, and that was the only clothing. Like we can see how much poverty stricken these people were. While Gandhiji was in Champaran, he kept a long distance vigil, supervision on the ashram. He used to send letters of orders regarding financial matters. Once he wrote to the locals that it was time to dig new latrines, as the old ones had already started to smell foul. So these were the concerns. Now these were the small concerns and everyday concerns which were tackled by Gandhiji. Now you can see that such a big national leader who was there to make changes in the political arena for these people is the very same person who's taking so much of interest in those keen and detailed things in the lives of these peasants. The Champaran incident changed Gandhiji's life, and at the last, in the end of the chapter, we see that Gandhiji said that he had done a regular thing. He had put his point across that the Britishers could not order him in his own country. So it was a clear-cut statement by Gandhiji that no Britisher is going to teach or is going to dictate terms in his own country, India. Then the Champaran Satyagraha was not an act of opposition. It was an act to help out the poor and the tortured peasants. This was Gandhiji's way to solve the issue. He did not aim at the fulfillment of ideas, rather, he was concerned for people. The basic idea was to serve humanity and make a free Indian who can stand for his own rights. At the end of the chapter, we see that there was a man by the name of Charles Freer Andrews who was a peacemaker, and he visited Gandhiji before going to for a tour in the Fiji Islands. Gandhiji's lawyer friends wanted Andrew to stay at the ashram and help them, but Gandhiji refused. Now there was a reason to it why he refused any friendship with a Britisher. He said that they did not need help of the Britishers, and it showed lack of trust in their own abilities. So he asked them not to seek any help from Mr. Andrews, as he was an Englishman. Rajendra Prasad later on stated that Gandhiji had read their thoughts and his reply served as the lesson of self-sufficiency for them, being self-dependent, free and helping, and the peasants. All these acts of Gandhiji were interconnected. So Gandhiji wanted to make these peasants self-reliant, self-confident and self-sufficient, and that is what he aimed at, so that when there is nobody like Gandhiji, then too these people are capable enough, they are powerful enough, they are confident enough that they can fight for themselves. So this was the chapter Indigo for you all.